Tom, I understand that you and your family were in Pearl Harbor before the attack, during the attack, and after the attack. How did you get to Pearl Harbor, and how old were you?
Well, my dad and brother, Forrest, were machinists for the Navy, civilian machinists for the Navy at Pearl Harbor. And after they had worked there for a while, they got the rest of the family, I and my sister and my mother, over there in about, I suppose, 1939 or 40 anyway. And they built a housing area for the families that worked there. It was just outside the fence of Pearl Harbor and Hickam Field. And that's where we lived when the attack came.
Now, how long had you been at Pearl Harbor before the attack? A year or two, or?
Oh, probably no more than a year. Probably got there in 40 sometime. I don't really remember when. But yeah, we were there a year anyway, before 41.
Okay. Now, Sunday morning of December 7th, were you in bed? Were you outside? Where were you?
Well, it was about 7 o'clock in the morning, as I recall, and I and my sister, we were outside playing. And
At 7:30 in the morning?
About that, yeah.
Oh.
And I think my dad and mother may have been still in bed. And when the attack occurred, we of course could hear it and see most of it. And everybody was out in the street watching it, not knowing it was a real attack. It could have been a mock war going on. And we watched it for quite some time. And sometime in the morning, a vehicle came through the area and told all the workers that worked at Pearl Harbor to report to their positions. And that was in the morning of December 7th. Later on that afternoon, another vehicle with loudspeakers on it came through the area and said there would be buses available to take us up into the mountains where it would be more safe. And in fact, I and my sister and my mother went and spent 2 nights in King Kamehameha College, not knowing what the outcome of my brother and dad were, and they didn't know what our situation was. We kissed them goodbye when they had to report for work, and we didn't know their outcome for a couple of days.
At what point, when you were watching this, did you realize this was not a demonstration, it was something more serious? How'd you know that?
Well, I'm not sure just when that moment was, whether it came across the radio or after we saw a couple planes go down in flames, and I could see the artillery flak in the air. I guess, I'm not sure just when the moment was, but sooner or later we discovered it was real. I could see the Japanese planes go over with the big horizon sun on the wingtips and the long torpedoes they had on carrying underneath. I can remember all that stuff pretty vividly.
Now, when you were up in the mountains, you said you stayed there 2 days. Did you come back to the same barracks you were living in then? Where'd you go after you left the mountain?
Yes, we came back to where we were living. I do have a bullet that hit our house, but there was very little damage done. You might say no damage done to the housing area. They concentrated on Pearl Harbor proper mostly. Very little damage to the houses.
Now, we're gonna look at a picture now of a bullet hole in the house. Is that a gas line next to it?
Yeah, yes, it is. And that was probably pretty fortunate, just where the bullet went. I had the bullet for quite some time. We dug it out, and I'm not sure. I didn't know one bullet from the other in those days, but it was something just a little larger than a 50 caliber. That's all I can say about that bullet.
That's pretty big.
Oh yeah.
50 caliber is pretty big bullet.
Yeah.
Okay. So now the strike is over. What do you do for the next several days or months? What happens next? Do your dads continue to work? Do you go home, or you stay? Or how long did you stay after the attack?
Well, we didn't come back for maybe almost another, I want to say almost another year maybe. We just, as a kid, we just went on with our normal routine. We were issued gas masks that we carried with us 24/7, and we just played and swam in the ocean, and they built a bomb shelter in our backyard. I got pictures of that. They built a bomb shelter. The government also put up blimps. What's the word I wanted? Yeah, blimps, I guess,
Blimps, yeah.
that were anchored with cables. They had them scattered out throughout the area that would avoid any military aircraft from trying to come in and strife the area for fear of hitting one of those cables. There were times when there were air raid alerts, and at night we would see the searchlights up in the air. Otherwise, we just went on playing, rode some sugarcane trains out into the field and ate sugarcane. And
Is that sweet right off the...
oh, it's sweet. Yeah, the trains were, the gauge was only yay wide, and we would ride them out into the sugarcane fields.
Did you have what they call nighttime blackouts for your lights in the buildings?
Yes, the entire town, I don't know, maybe the entire island was on blackout. You had to put something over your windows, and I can remember selling cardboard for blackout material to put over the windows, and there were inspectors that came through at night, and if they could see any light, they went to your electrical box outside the house, and they turned your power off. So you were pretty careful in making sure your house was blacked out.
Wow. Now you went back home about a year later. And where was home at the time?
Home time is right where I am right now. And
What town?
I'm in Hines, Minnesota. I'm on 40 acres. The 40 acres I was born and raised on 85 years ago. When we left, when we went to Hawaii, we went over on the Matson line. That Matson had two ships called the Matsonia, and one was called the Lurling. And we went over on the Matson. It took 5 days to get over there. When we came back, we were on a troop transport ship, assisted by naval support, and it took us 7 days to get back home due to the zigzagging that they did to avoid detection.
Or torpedo.
Yeah, any kind of detection, that air or submarine, yeah.
When you left the States to go to Hawaii, did you have to bring a lot of stuff with you, or have stuff shipped over if you're going to be there for?
Oh, let's see.
Besides,
No, I recall us storing most of our stuff in one of the rooms in our house here, and we had that locked. I think we rented the place to someone to live in, and no, we didn't take much with us, clothing, of course, and that was about it.
now, when you came back here, how old were you at that time?
I was 10 years old.
When you came back to Black
Yeah.
Dog or Hines here?
Yeah.
Okay. So now some time goes by, and then did you join the Army, or you drafted, or what?
The draft was about to take me,
What year was this in?
1953.
Okay.
I somehow knew the draft board was breathing down my neck, and I wanted to get into a unit that of my choosing. So I went to the recruitment center. I enlisted. The recruiter took me down to the draft board, and I got a release, and immediately enlisted into the Army, into the 35th Quartermaster Corps at Fort Carson, Colorado. They were a mule pack organization at those times, 35th Quartermaster Corps. But they didn't really need anyone when I got there, so I was immediately transferred to, and I'm not sure just where I went right away. After going through basic training at Fort Riley, Kansas, I went to clerk typist school, learned how to type. I had a little bit out of high school also, and I got into a unit called Mountain and Cold Weather Training Command, and they were stationed at Fort Carson and had a little substation 110 miles up in the mountains called Camp Hale, Colorado, near Leadville. And I spent, I don't know, at least two winters up there.
Okay. Did you leave the States at all when you were in the Army?
I did not. I was, let's see, Korea was just over as I was going through basic training. I went through basic training in May of '53, May, June, July, and Korea was just over, and I did not see any wartime.
So how much time did you put in active duty in the service?
I put exactly 3 years. 3 years, 0 months, 0 days. And the rest of my 38 years, or the rest of my 35 years, were in the reserves for a total of 38 years.
Now, when you were in the reserve, did you ever get called out at all, or just had to do reserve duty once a year?
I just had reserve duty, although our unit was on alert to be called, and our training got to where we were going to training once a week instead of once a month. But we never got called, so we never went. That was one of the advantages of being in the reserves, is that you couldn't be recalled up as an individual. You only got called if your unit went. I did go back on active duty for 6 weeks of ski training with the reserves up in Alaska in January and February of 1975. 6 weeks of ski training. In fact, I graduated as second in the class.
Was that ski training? That was for the infantry, wasn't it?
That certainly was, and corresponded very good, nicely with my mountain and cold weather training command that I had. In fact, I met some fellas that were up there in the unit that that was training us that I was with in Fort Carson, Colorado, years earlier. And at that time, the reserve unit was doing a lot of winter training at Fort Riley. So of course I was a ski instructor when we went to winter camp.
Well, I noticed in the back room here, over your shoulder, a lot of ham radio equipment. When did you get involved in ham radio?
Oh, let's see. Well, it had to be at least 13, 14 years ago, because I've renewed my license, and that's every 10 years. So I suppose 14 years ago or so, I especially after they dropped the having to learn the code, I got my license. A lot of it due to you, Dave.
I don't know why. All right, now you're into ham radio for fun, and I understand you had a short stint working for the National Park Service out in Yellowstone. What was that about?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it must have been 5 years ago or so. They needed in fact, I think I was listening to you on the ham radio. You were trying to enlist somebody to go out there and be a lookout on Mount Washburn in Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. And as I recall, he wasn't interested, and I somehow jumped on the radio and said, I might be. And you gave me the name and number of who to contact, and I did. And he asked if I would send a resume. And a resume, I've been retired I don't know how many years already. Anyway, I sent a resume, and after he read that, this was going to be a volunteer job, no pay at all. But after he read my resume, he said, "Yeah, we'll take you, but not as a volunteer. We'll take you as a GS4." I think it was $11.47 an hour. So out to Yellowstone National Park I went. Shirley came along. It was just a spur of the moment thing. She had a class reunion to go to in Alabama, and so she couldn't stay out there with me, but she was up there on the mountaintop with me for about 9 days, and I never came off. 42 days I was out there. I never came off the mountaintop.
Did you find any fires in the lookout tower?
That happened to be a year when the countryside was really nice and green. My boss told me that normally all around me was just parched tinderbox, and this year it was not. And I don't recall. I don't think I reported any fires.
How about the tourism? You have a lot of visitors?
Yes, we had the building I was in. It wasn't a tower. I was already on top of the mountain. The first floor was a visitor center. It was looking over the caldera of the Yellowstone volcano. And the second story was an observation deck for the visitors. And the third story was a glassed-in 16 by 16 glass-in cage where Shirley and I stayed. 360 degrees of glass all the way around, where we had the fire locator. What do you call that? The
Firefinder.
Firefinder. And map reading. Of course, I taught that in the service, and reading the vernier on the Firefinder was not a problem.
Did you get a lot of people from different parts of the world come up and visit you?
You bet. I had some people from Australia, some people from Great Britain. Whenever I had people that far away, I actually took them up into my quarters and showed them that part of it. Since they came that far, I thought at least I owed them that.
Yeah.
Let them look through the scope that I looked through, and yeah, it was interesting.
What was the reason that you left after 42 days? Was that the contract?
Well, we didn't have a precise departure time agreed upon. However, with the airlines, I think it was something like the 13th of August. That's when my round trip ticket was up. And we both agreed that was satisfactory. And my boss had found another replacement for me for the rest of the summer. My daughter, Tamara, came out and stayed with me the last night, and that was when they were having, what do you call it, the Crusade, when all the shooting stars. She counted 41 shooting stars just laying in bed, looking out the glass windows. And on her way back down the next morning, she happened to stop and talk. She couldn't ride with me. People that came up to the center had to walk the last 3 miles. And so when we saw the vehicle coming up to get me, that's when she started walking back down to the parking lot. And she ran across the guy, his name was Dave, the guy that was going to take my place. And we stopped the vehicle on the way down and talked to them for a minute. Up in the tower, before you went up to the tower, you went to the nearest town outside of Yellowstone Park. You established a grocery account at the store. We took up $202 worth of groceries the first trip up. And then every 2 weeks, you could you'd call the grocery store, place your order, and the Park Service would go get it and bring it up to you. You paid for it, of course, but they would deliver it to you. So 42 days, I didn't really have any desire to come up. It was nice up there.
Now, when you got down, I heard something about you got down just in time. There was an ice storm.
Yeah, I guess so. They soon after that, the icicles. It was also an ice storm. I heard we had communication with Dave after we left, and the icicles were horizontal off the building instead of vertical. So it was, they came up and got him almost on a emergency basis. You had white knuckles as you drove down those 3 miles. So, yep.
Why'd they pull him off? Because of the storm, or they didn't say?
Yeah, apparently with that kind of weather, there was no need to be up there, and there was, I don't know, maybe chance of loss of the electricity. Oh, by the way, the building I was in had 2 electric heaters, all kinds of communication. The communication with the entire Yellowstone. At that time, of course, I was a ham radio operator. I had communication with our catch down at the cantonment area, and I had communication with the another lookout, Mount Holmes, which was across the valley. He was also a ham radio operator, and I can remember talking on ham radio to Las Vegas, Nevada.
On 2 meters?
On 2 meters, through a repeater.
What do you use for an antenna?
I didn't really need one. I was I had my handheld that had the telescopic. I took the rubber ducky off, and a telescopic one that was, what, half wavelength. And yeah, I didn't really need any more.